Welcome to another episode of the Social Impact Journal, the podcast where I talk to the founders, innovators, and experts driving positive change in our world. Today, I'm meeting with Sophie Javers, the Global Engagement Manager for Feed the Future's Innovation Lab for Markets, Risks and Resilience, hosted at University California, Davis. We'll be talking about index insurance tools and how the lab are supporting local researchers to drive locally led development. Sophie, good morning. Welcome
Hi.
to the show.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. Very excited.
So it's really good to have you here. I know we're recording in Dubai during COP28 week.
Yes, it's been crazy.
I can imagine. How has it been?
It's been really interesting. A lot of connections to be made and information to be shared. It's really great to be a part of it.
For sure. So before we dive into what Feed the Future is as a program and the MRR lab at UC Davis, it'd be great to hear a little bit about your career, because I know off air we spoke about some of the places you've been and some of the great work you've done.
Sure. So I kind of come to international development through a windy course. Started out living in Russia and Central Asia after college, and then moving to China, both Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China. I've really got a sense for, at least in those areas, kind of what's going on in the world and what we might need to do to make things better. And so by the time I kind of got back to the U.S., after having had kids and kind of getting back on the career bandwagon, I was really excited to be able to join the Markets, Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab to kind of see through what I had learned by living abroad. Yeah.
Excellent. So the Market Risk and Resilience Lab is part of the Feed the Future program.
Yes.
So what is Feed the Future?
So that's a U.S. government global food security initiative. It's a bipartisan initiative, and through the Feed the Future initiative, they also funded innovation labs. So I think there's 22, 24 labs at this point scattered across U.S. universities. And the goal of those innovation labs is to support research around food security and agriculture in different forms, and then also really be the forefront of kind of the research producers to kind of find scalable solutions.
Thanks, Sophie. And the Markets, Risks and Resilience Lab within the Feed the Future program, what is your specific goal within that lab?
Right. So we're a little bit different. We focus on developing and testing financial innovations to kind of better mitigate the risks that farmers face. By mitigating risks, risk we know kind of makes and keeps farmers poor. And so when we're able to find ways to mitigate those risks, we can potentially unlock kind of productive investments for those smallholder farmers or pastoralists. And then through unlocking those investments, they can kind of find a pathway kind of up and out, kind of out of poverty, and kind of build resilience, both kind of an economic resilience and hopefully a kind of a climate adaptive resilience as well.
Okay, cool. And I know you've published so many different studies and working with different partners across the world. So how do you engage with local partners?
We're really excited to be a part of this kind of growing movement of putting localization at the forefront of international development research. Traditionally, at least in the U.S., and I think this is kind of a broader global north issue, but funding has run through U.S. universities for this kind of, I'm talking about kind of academic research, but funding has run through U.S. universities first, and then it kind of gets funneled into creating local partnerships, and then kind of the money trickles down kind of on the ground where the research is being held. And so the innovation lab is, the Markets, Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab is really trying to kind of flip the model and create more direct funding flows to local partners, kind of leaving out a bit of the middleman, so to speak, of the U.S. universities. And why we're doing this is for a couple different reasons. One, largely, is that for development interventions to be successful, they have to be inclusive. They have to have local voices. I mean, it's kind of elementary. And by directing funding to those local research institutes, that's what you're getting, right? You're getting people who are on the ground. You're getting people who know that kind of context-specific issues. They're the ones that have closer connections and ties to local government policymakers who have the ability to actually implement policy changes based on that rigorous research. And so by being able to fund local institutions directly, you're going to see more powerful development impacts in the long run. And this is part of a movement that's happening. I mean, USAID just recently published their new localization policy. And in that policy, they have I think it's by 2025, so in 2 years' time, they want to make sure that at least a quarter, 25% of their funding is going to be directed to local institutions. And I think, now this is off the top of my head, but by 2050, they're saying that at least half of their USAID funding is going to be in some way, shape, or form directly funding local work. And so this is a movement that we're really proud to be kind of at the forefront of.
Amazing. I know we had a guest about 2 months ago, Ernest Wisen. So he was the president of the CBO's coalition in Malawi, and also one of the drivers in Malawi of the movement for community-led development. So we're really trying to facilitate that discussion on the podcast as well. And I've seen it a lot, maybe on the project work, but in the research side, not so much.
Yeah.
So do you have any examples of countries you've worked with, partners where this has worked effectively?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, this is kind of twofold. So we're both focused on funding, or kind of getting more money into the hands of local researchers, so they can kind of take control of that process. And then we're also working on some capacity strengthening as well to make sure that those researchers can better manage these kinds of crazy complex funding cycles like USAID. And so the project that we launched back in, I think it was 2020 now, is called All In, the Advancing Local Leadership, Innovation, and Networks. Okay. And so we are co-managing, it's $4 or $5 million now worth of our grant money that was originally given to us by USAID through a partnership in Kenya. So we're working with a local think tank called the International Center for Evaluation and Development. And through that partnership, we're then subawarding out to, I think it's 11 or 12 different projects across West and Eastern Africa. So we've got projects in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, Malawi. And so we're working directly with, you mentioned Malawi, Lilongwe University. For example, in Malawi. We're working directly with Tegemeo Institute in Kenya. We're working directly with Ilorin University in Nigeria, University of Ghana in Accra. And so, and it's been, we're still kind of, I think most of those projects are working on midline data. So we're kind of in kind of lay speak, that's kind of they're midway through their project cycle in terms of their research, but we're already seeing really impressive kind of impacts in terms of these researchers being able to have, be the lead. So they're the lead kind of investigators of these research questions. And we're seeing like early and impressive engagement with local policymakers. Awesome. We're seeing already add-on effects. There's a project in Uganda, a really wonderful researcher named Florence Muhanguzi, who's working on kind of women's empowerment project. And, she's already been able to get additional funding based on being a part of our cohort of the All In research project. She now kind of has had the exposure and the kind of some of the administrative training to then be able to take on additional outside funding. So we're really excited about this project. Mm-hmm.
That's so fascinating. So that's the All In project.
The All In Research Initiative, Okay.
And
so we're also, as you mentioned, the All In kind of triggered, we're also launching an All In Research Network.
Okay.
So this is a network that is bringing together peers across the continent specifically kind of economic researchers, but not exclusively, and putting them together in working groups. So this is, a volunteer organization. So kind of researchers who are interested can join, and they come together and are put into working thematically kind of paired research groups. And they can share information. They can workshop working papers. They can also attend a series of webinars around kind of grant writing or financial award management. So it's a combination of both kind of some capacity strengthening and kind of building up a cohort of researchers that can then act as a resource for them. And that's our ultimate goal, that this cohort, these All-In Research Network members can be seen as kind of experts in the field that also have the capacity to deal with kind of these larger USAID awards. And so we're hoping that they'll be seen as kind of the go-to for, outside organizations who are looking for researchers in the country. So that's just getting launched, but we're really excited about kind of creating that local capacity and creating a space for knowledge sharing.
And for this research network, the cohorts, how would an academic go about applying?
We have a website, the ARN, so All-In Research Network website. I don't have the exact address.
We'll put it in the links.
the top of my head. There's also a monthly newsletter that you can sign up for that shares kind of the webinar information for the training sessions that we do, and gives all sorts of information about funding opportunities, shares highlights or policy briefs around colleagues' research. So it's really it's a pretty fabulous resource that we're excited to kind of build up a little bit more in the future.
Fantastic. You mentioned a bit about capacity building and around grant writing, financial award management. Are they some of the key areas that you're focusing on? Yeah, I mean it's kind of twofold, right? So there is a need to do some of that kind of strengthening, capacity strengthening, but because there's a real specificity to kind of, and I keep going back to USAID kind of grant funding, but I think it's similar with kind of other international grant funding organizations where there's there's a certain way of doing things. There's a way to do it, right? It's not easy, is it? It's not easy, and it doesn't necessarily make sense or is obvious. And so, there's definitely, I think it's helpful to do that kind of training. But that's just a very small part of it. Yeah. I guess away from research with USAID's funding, the localization strategy, I've also seen a kind of a gap in knowledge with community-based organizations, local NGOs, with understanding those financial award management structures. There's going to need to be capacity building for organizations across the space, I think. Absolutely. Dissemination of research findings I'm often interested in, and I guess through the network you're building, those academics in the cohort can also be a resource for local dissemination, right? So that's exactly part of it. And it's so as a MR Innovation Lab, we have really prioritized making sure that research dissemination kind of is at the forefront of what we do. Okay. So obviously the primary is research, right? Yep. Rigorous evidence-based research. But kind of right behind that is, I think, really important aspect is dissemination. And, because not, to be flippant, but when you do this research, so often it gets kind of lost in a dusty academic journal, right? And then what good is that doing anyone? And then not to say that that's not important, but it really needs to get moved beyond that. So I'm really quite proud of being a part of this kind of lab that has prioritized dissemination and the importance of knowledge sharing. So we do that in different ways. It's kind of more traditional communication strategies through newsletters and websites and policy briefs, which are really important. But we've also been able to kind of implement a kind of more complex engagement strategy that kind of
tackles different levels of stakeholders.
Okay.
So looking kind of from the bottom up and the top down in terms of, bottom up would, I'd say, include kind of our researchers, really kind of connecting on the ground with local voices, local policymakers, and kind of making sure that the evidence that they're generating kind of percolates up from, from that ground level. But then also kind of, as a management entity, we've really kind of prioritized also kind of tackling those larger international organizations that are influential in the way that we talk about these issues, the kind of language creators in a sense, or language pushers in a sense, where all of a sudden you hear kind of localization more, you hear the word resilience more, right? So there's those organizations out there that are either both funders, or donors, or development programmers that we try and access through kind of working groups, networking, partnerships, to make sure that our research also kind of hits that umbrella level as well, so that we're kind of able to disseminate and connect on multiple levels. And I think it's been quite a productive way of doing things so far.
I think it's fascinating, and I haven't heard it honestly very often. As you say, a lot of these findings would be in the journal, and especially you're working in rural communities with smallholder farmers. You need local actors to be able to access that, and the journal is of course very important, but I can see you're using very unique ways for dissemination that might be more accessible for local audiences. Yeah,
kind of trying the whole swath of stakeholder engagement, kind of from from those kind of global north international actors down to, or not down, but across kind of all scopes to the local level. I think it's really important to make sure you don't leave anyone out.
So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that you face when you are collecting data and conducting research in rural communities? I know majority of your projects are in sub-Saharan Africa.
Beyond the kind of traditional issues of, poor infrastructure, or sometimes you have cultural intricacies that you have to kind of work through. I really do think, and I'm just reiterating that same point, that ensuring that you have local leadership involved, inclusive voices as part of the project, and you're just going to get you're going to be far more successful in your development work if you ensure that local leaders are involved, and you have those kind of indigenous voices. So.
Let's touch briefly on index insurance.
Sure.
As I know this is one of the focuses of the lab. I know you've done a lot of studies. It'd be great to hear more about your work and some of the projects.
Sure. So the Markets Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab has been working on index insurance for a really long time. I'd say over 20 years now. I say I'm using the royal we. It's really Michael Carter. He's professor of agricultural resource economics at University of California, Davis, and he's the director of our Markets Risk and Resilience Innovation Lab. So he's been doing index insurance research for a really long time. But also our lab has, through multiple iterations of our lab, we've been funding and investigating index insurance. I think right now our current portfolio has at least 10 projects that are focused on index insurance in some form or another. So I think to list the specifics of all of those projects off the top of my head, I'm not sure if I'm able to do that. Maybe can I tell you about one favorite?
Yeah.
So one of my favorite projects that is being funded right now, and actually just got a little bit of extra money just recently, which I'm excited about, is a project that has brought together some really great partners. So an NGO called the BOMA Project that works in Kenya. Takaful Insurance Africa, which is a part of the insurance private sector, also in Kenya. The International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI, and then ourselves. So this is among other people working on this, but those are kind of the main partners of this project. And we were brought on board to do an evaluation of the BOMA project, which is a graduation program, kind of an asset building program for the ultra poor in northern Kenya. And so we initially did the evaluation. And what we discovered is that BOMA is doing a really great job. Yeah. Their kind of gender-focused interventions are really successfully building up the assets, income, savings of these women. Yeah. Really impressive, actually, in terms of the kind of the change. But as we were doing this evaluation, we were saying, okay, well, these women are living, they're incredibly vulnerable. They're living in drought-prone areas. So the BOMA project is doing this incredible work to build up the assets of these women. But what happens when a drought hits? Yeah. Can we create a more sustainable program by both building up the assets for these women and then protecting them?
Okay.
And so what we did was layer on an insurance product. So insurance can protect these assets. The problem was, in this area, the main kind of insurance product is index-based livestock insurance, IBLI. So that's been around for a long time. The Kenya government includes it in their kind of social safety net programming. But IBLI is a livestock product that focuses mainly on men's livestock, right? So the larger, women do have livestock. They do, goats or poultry, but men do cattle and camels. And so the IBLI focuses on those larger kind of animals of men's domain. So the question was, how can we use this existing index insurance product that's well, saturated in the market, but actually have it kind of protect women's assets? Okay. And so what we did with a little bit of kind of digital market research and some really interesting kind of gameplay around an app that was created called Sim Pastoralist. It's one of our graduate students at UC Davis, who's now a professor at USF. He created this game where you could kind of play and buy insurance and sell goats and see how drought affected your choices. Okay. And so we framed the insurance in a way that wasn't just livestock, but we put a family framing on it. So it was family insurance. So same product, same insurance, still protecting livestock, but the family framing spoke to kind of or understood the women's kind of intra-household risk, right? So if something bad happens out in the rangeland, the women feel it too, right? Yeah. And so we kind of reframed the product to speak to women's risk mitigation needs. And what we discovered was that the women were all for it. When they realized that they could use this insurance product to protect their own assets and protect their family, then they bought more. And it was like 30% more uptake when you had the family framing. And then for those women that already had insurance, I think they bought an additional 50% more insurance. Wow. With the family framing as compared to the livestock framing. And so, it tells us that, women need insurance too, right? When we can kind of speak to those, really show them that we're understanding kind of their risk mitigation needs and create products for that. It was very well received. The other thing we learned was that sold the insurance, drought hits, the insurance does in fact protect their assets it's kind of a 1-for-1. So drought hits and kind of knocks out about half of the assets that we saw that women had built through the BOMA program, and the insurance kind of recouped by half. So it's kind of a 1-for-1 protection. Yeah. I'm not sure if I explained that quite correctly, but so the insurance is really basically covering the possible devastation that could occur with a drought. So that's one project that we're really excited about. There's a lot more to investigate. We don't quite know kind of if there are any impacts around this asset protection aspect of the insurance and kind of women's empowerment. There's also some questions around kind of psychosocial aspects, like depression and aspirations that, are interesting to look into. Some kind of, questions around learning, or how else to kind of encourage or bolster the use of these products through maybe, savings, kind of insurance savings groups.
Yep.
So that's something that we're launching now, actually.
Wow.
So it's a really, really fascinating, but kind of fundamentally, these women make decisions about their families, right? They decide how much food they can get on the table. They can decide if they're going to be able to pay school fees, right? So by bolstering and protecting the assets of these women, we're trying to get at that issue of the kind of intergenerational transfer of poverty, right? And so, it's pretty foundational in terms of, the work that we're doing.
It sounds like an excellent project, and I want to ask a few more questions on the app.
Okay.
So the previous graduate from UCD. So the app.
It's Andrew Hobbs is his name. Yeah, Andrew Hobbs created. He created this application. It's called Sim Pastoralist. You can get it on Google, Android, whatever app store. It's really cute. There's little digital goats that kind of roam across the rangeland, and it either rains or clouds pass and it doesn't rain. And you can kind of pick how many goats you want to insure. You pay school fees. You can sell milk. You can sell goats. Baby goats are born. It's kind of a whole process, and you can play across multiple seasons. And you can see as it plays out, the impacts on your savings or on your income across multiple years, depending on whether there's a drought or not a drought. And it really helps kind of make this very potentially difficult concept of insurance a little bit more real. Because insurance is kind of this invisible invisible intervention, right? You don't see the results of it. So you're paying these premiums, or you're, and you're, you don't want a drought to occur, right? So you're kind of paying these premiums, and you don't,
Yeah,
necessarily see the positive results of it. But this game, was one way of allowing these pastoralists to kind of get a sense of what it was that we were we were doing. So
I think gamifying training is a great strategy, all right, and it makes insurance more tangible, as you say. How did it work in practice, though? Because if it's a mobile app, the clients of the BOMA project, I guess, access to smartphones is quite limited.
Yeah, so in this case, it was really just the project participants. So we had tablets, and we did training sessions. So I don't have the exact numbers, but there were many different training sessions across, different groups, different regions. And they were brought in, and it was kind of husbands and wives together. So we were also kind of looking at that gender disaggregated data, right? Kind of figuring out how decision-making processes were divergent or the same in terms of how men and women were processing this information through the game. It was kind of through evaluators, that we had trained, and then they went out into the rangeland and used tablets and played the games and did that. So it wasn't using smartphones or because that, in this case, you're right, it would not have worked.
So this project came about after an evaluation of the BOMA project. So they were doing different interventions, asset building. You talked about saving and the link between saving and insurance as well. So what do you think about bundling insurance products with other financial services or agronomic tools? Is that the way to go? Is that an effective strategy to increase climate resilience? I'd be interested to pick your brains on that.
Yes, definitely. So this project I was just mentioning kind of, in essence, was kind of a bundling of both asset building and then asset protection to kind of create more effective development outcomes. Yes, I think this is definitely the way forward. We are doing another project. It is currently ongoing, but it started actually back in 2017. And that is a project that we ran in Tanzania and Mozambique. And that was the bundling of genetic and financial tools to kind of better create or it was the combining of these tools to kind of find the complementarities between them. And so in this particular case, it was a 5-year study, although we have add-ons currently now, but a 5-year study, 2 countries, and I'm going to use a little jargon, but it was a randomized control trial. Okay. So kind of one very rigorous method or way of doing this kind of research. And we bundled drought-tolerant seeds with seed replacement index insurance. Okay. And what we saw was a couple kind of levels of results that we have. So the first set of results were that the drought-tolerant seeds were incredibly effective, but only protecting farmers against a mid-season drought. Okay, but farmers don't only suffer mid-season droughts, right? So what happens when a catastrophic drought occurs? Those drought-tolerant seeds fail, right? So they're drought-resistant, but they're not drought-proof. Okay. And so kind of relying on so-called magic seeds isn't enough to really protect the farmers in a substantial enough way that they can then kind of feel confident enough to make productive investments and kind of, keep kind of that forward progress. So insurance is a way to potentially protect the farmers as well. However, insurance can be really expensive for farmers to take up. And it's, as we were just mentioning, kind of a hard concept sometimes to, kind of process. And so what we did was the drought-tolerant seeds covered the mid-season drought, mitigated the risks of mid-season drought. The insurance we limited to just cover catastrophic drought.
Okay, so that reduces the cost.
Exactly.
As it's, okay.
Exactly. So you're not, the insurance is not covering the entire swath of potential.
Like the drought-tolerant seeds, like the big excess.
Yeah.
And then the insurance is is just to take, okay.
So you're really using the complementarities of those two products to make the whole bundle more effective and efficient. Right. You're covering a broader swath of farmer risk by bundling both the drought-tolerant seeds with the insurance. And they're more cost-effective because the insurance is less expensive because you're only covering a smaller band of that risk. But then you're using the drought-tolerant seeds to cover something that's kind of fairly easy to cover in terms of risk. And so what we discovered was that the farmers who just had the drought-tolerant seeds after a catastrophic drought, there was a failure, right? And they kind of lost their yields. They lost their resilience. They kind of dropped below, their yield capacity, stuff like that. And so, but what we did see was that the farmers that had the drought-tolerant seeds and the insurance, so they not only kind of traveled the line that kind of if there had not even been a drought, but what they did was they actually surpassed it. Wow. They went way up. And what we're seeing is that they kind of took off on this really positive trajectory of kind of income and investment is because they knew they were protected. Right? They were confident enough. They had learned about the process, learned that they would be protected both by the drought-tolerant seeds and the insurance in case of a catastrophic drought. And they made it kind of unlocked for them, as I mentioned, I think at the beginning of the podcast, but it unlocked for them the ability to make on-farm investments. So they bought, before even a drought, right? They bought better fertilizer. They bought more kind of genetically modified, advanced seeds, more drought-tolerant seeds. So they were both making more money and were becoming more kind of climate resilient. Wow. And we call this kind of resilience dividend. We call it resilience plus. So it's really kind of looking at, anticipating or looking at that kind of anticipatory risk mitigation, and looking at it not just as a way of building kind of resilience or helping farmers kind of bounce back after some kind of climate shock, but really allowing them to just jettison themselves up on a much kind of faster and sharper kind of pathway out of poverty and towards resilience. So we're really excited about that project. Yeah.
For sure. I'm really looking forward to following it also. Where can our listeners find the lab? Are you on social media platforms? Of course, you have a website as well.
Yes, we have. Our website is basis, BASIS at ucdavis.edu. And we are also on LinkedIn. Okay. We have, I think it's just the MR Innovation Lab. The website is really a great resource for information. We have all of our policy briefs, project reports, news stories, Q&As with our, investigators, our researchers, and then links to all sorts of other information that we try and make available. Because as I mentioned initially, one of our kind of real pushes as a academic research consortium is that we're trying to make this information as available as possible. Yeah.
Sophie, it's been a really fun conversation today. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I have one final question.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about a lot of the projects and in a lot of countries. So if you now have your own book, your own social impact journal. So if you take one page to write a piece of advice for an innovator, it might be within the index insurance space, it might be out, but those that are building innovations to support smallholder farmers become more climate resilient. What would you share for them considering if it's research, if it's product development, what piece of advice do you have for them?
That's a tough one. All right, I'm going to go with I'm speaking from my own experience, not necessarily as a representative of our lab, but based on my own experience, I would say that innovations that can focus on women's empowerment and climate action are kind of the two areas that I'd love to see kind of forward progress. I think those are the areas where we can really create some foundational change. So women's empowerment, climate action. I think that's where kind of a more hopeful future lies for us if we focus on those two things.
Sophie, thank you so much for coming on the show and talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks so much, Jack. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Sophie as much as I have. And Sophie has spoken at an event at COP28 in Dubai in December. So we are leaving the link below in the description for you to watch that. Also, the website for the Market Risk and Resilience Lab, you can find, along with a lot of other resources from what we've discussed today. If you did enjoy the episode, please make sure to follow and subscribe on our channels. Please stay tuned for next week. Thank you.